Hi everybody, and welcome back to Extraordinary. On today's episode, we have a very special guest. Her name is Kristine, and we unpacked all sorts of good stuff today, from how her trip to Senegal impacted her view of happiness, to how she stumbled back into Catholicism, and we even talked about how being a philosophy major has impacted her view of religion, and how all that ties in with love and the fear of being loved and how we can get over that and really create meaning in our life. So I hope you dive into today's episode and you really enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot, so I hope you listen to it and you feel very inspired. And yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy. I do also want to note that for this episode, the audio got a little bit funky, so I apologize for the occasional screeching noise in the background. It is not enjoyable, but I still decided to publish this anyway, and I'm working on figuring out the issue, so hopefully that will be done. Welcome to Extraordinary, everybody. Today we have a very special guest. This is Kristine. All right. Well, do you want to give us a little introduction about who you are, your background, anything stands out to you?
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. Such an honor.
Of course.
Appreciate it muchly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Kristine. I'm originally from Latvia. I lived there up until I was 17, which is when I moved to Japan. I studied in an international school called UWC Japan. Probably most international students on campus know about it or have been a part of it in the past. And after graduation, I took a gap year and I went to Senegal with a Catholic organization where I lived for a year. And ever since, I'm here and I'm graduating in May. Woohoo!
Wow, that's a crazy background. What are you studying?
I study philosophy. Yeah, I was also a psychoanalysis minor until I had to drop it because I couldn't squeeze one more class in, but it is what it is.
It's unfortunate. What made you decide to follow philosophy?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, we're going right in.
Dive in deep.
Well, this is actually an interesting story because I knew that I'm going to study philosophy for years, really. I mean, for years, without ever having taken a single philosophy class. And so it kind of was a really big part of my identity, because people would say, so what will you do after high school? And I say, well, study philosophy. But then I actually have no idea if I actually like philosophy, since I never taken a single class. But I think it all started when I was 12 or 14. I grew up Catholic, and Catholic faith has been an important part of my childhood, and still up until this day, it's a crucial aspect of my personality, of my character, of my life, of my worldview. And there was a time I kind of left faith a little bit, and I started to explore other options in life, until I somehow, through philosophy, I started to read more theology, more proofs for and against the existence of God, and because I still was searching for something. I was searching for the truth, and I thought if Christianity is not the truth, then I want to find the truth elsewhere. And so yeah, it led me to read books, listen to all types of YouTube videos, and mostly they were very theologically philosophical. And I think philosophy really helped me to nourish this desire for the truth. And eventually I found it once again in the Catholic faith. I came back. And ever since, it's been really kind of a nourishment of the desires that I have in my heart for the truth, the beauty, and the goodness. And then I came to CC, and that was the time I thought, well, this is when I realized if all my life has been a lie, or I actually like philosophy, or I will have to look for something totally different. I took my first class with Jonathan here, Philosophy as a Way of Life, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But then block 4 I took Greek philosophy, which was all about truth, beauty, and goodness, which is when I realized this is really the starting point for all kind of Catholic theology, Thomas Aquinas and Augustine. And that's when I thought, yep, I found my home. This is exactly what I want to study and what I want to dedicate my whole life to, really.
That's really great. How would you say philosophy has impacted your understanding of your past experiences of travel with living in Senegal and Japan, in Latvia, all those places?
It's a hard question because I feel like it's kind of the opposite, really. I feel like those travel experiences have really influenced the way I view philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
I think traveling by definition is something that really expands one's mind and just seeing so many different ways that people can live and think about the world and the languages they speak that are so different, which really changes the mindset itself because the very structure is just so completely different. I think living in Japan was fun. I think that's how I would describe it. It was really fun. I definitely grew intellectually. It was a really intellectually stimulating environment. But I think the place that really changed me as a person was Senegal and that organization that I was with there. And it was really living alongside the poor, the oppressed, the sick, the hungry, and building those friendships and walking alongside them that I realized later I made these connections to Greek philosophy, to my passion for the quest for what's true and good and beautiful, is that they never lost sight of these values, and it was very present in their lives and in the ways that I think are kind of lost in our modern society here in the States and mostly in Europe as well, in most parts, because the truth for us no longer is something we look for because it's simply relativism. Relativism has kind of taken up the name of the ultimate truth. For goodness, I mean, everything is relative as well. Like, there's no really good and bad. It's just whatever you feel like doing. That's good. Cultural relativism. And then beauty, kind of same thing. Foucault said it's everything is power that is used to oppress anyway. So how can you care about beauty when there are people suffering? So I think that's kind of the modern, postmodern way of looking at the world. Whereas in Senegal, even though most of my friends were illiterate, so they basically couldn't read Greek philosophy and big philosophical works, but they truly had this beautiful wisdom that they lived by in such a simple and beautiful way that I could learn so much from, and now kind of understand more conceptually. But it was truly an example of what it means to live a good life, like what it truly means to be a good person and love your life despite all the suffering and difficulties that are so present and so oftentimes oppressive. But despite that, to truly look for those things that are beautiful and good and true, and thus to find some kind of happiness in life.
Wow, that's really cool. Would you say that you talk about almost this optimism that people had when you were in Senegal that really impacted you and showed you these different ways of life? Is that kind of the only thing that really struck you, or is there some other elements? Like, what was their way of life, and can you explain more about that and how that touched you more?
Such a beautiful question. I could talk about it for so long. So I think I have two encounters that come to my mind right now. The first one is a little simpler and quicker, so I'll start with that one. Once again, a positive thing. There's so many positive things and so much suffering, but so much beautiful things in the midst of all that they recognize themselves. But I was talking to a friend, a Senegalese friend. Her name was Agnès, still is. And we were talking about her financial difficulties, and she was sharing of how difficult it is to raise her. She only had 2 children, whereas the average number of children is usually 4 for one woman, and usually those women don't have husbands, or the husbands left, because really in the capital city in Dakar, it's really the families are very wounded in many ways, and husbands, it's a normal thing that husbands leave the women, their wives. And so she said it was difficult, she was struggling, yet then she shared how each time a neighbor would come, she would always help them, give them food or money, and then she would always send the money back to her village as well, because it's her family, and that's just what they do. There was this one specific phrase that really, really struck me, and I think it's so true. She said, if there's anybody in Senegal that is dying of hunger, it's only because they never asked for help. And it was such a powerful phrase because it really kind of described I feel like the word collectivist society is such a reductive way of saying it, even though we distinguish individualism and collectivism. And I think, yeah, there's definitely a part of it, but it's really just a cultural mindset of I am there for the others, and I am because others are. You know how Descartes said, I am, therefore, I think, therefore I am. It's very much me. But here I am because others are. And it's truly this sense of belonging to a family, to a community, to a parish, to a village. And that's kind of the basis for their identity, which I find so beautiful because it's inherently aimed at interconnectedness and empathy. So that I found very beautiful. And another thing which is kind of similar, on a similar note, I had this wonderful friend in Senegal that I love very dearly. His name is Badji. And he has such a beautiful and powerful life story that when I heard it, I didn't know what to do with myself. It's like I had found such a treasure that I thought I'm not even worthy of having heard, but it was truly such a gift for him to share this with me. He grew up in this small village. He still has around 20 siblings. It's a huge family and a very, very poor family because in villages it's extremely hard to get by and if there's not enough rain, then they don't get enough food, and so they basically eat what they grow themselves. And when the weather conditions are not helpful, then it's extremely difficult to survive. So he's actually the eldest son, and when he was 7, his father died. And somehow the cows, because they survived based on cows, and the meat and the milk, etc. The cows suddenly miraculously got some kind of a disease and died alongside the father of the family. And so it was truly a horrible tragedy for the whole family, for the mother especially. She didn't know what to do. They were really, really struggling to survive. And so Badji, this 7-year-old kid, I think they struggled up until he became 12, I think. And so when he became 12, he realized that now the whole well-being of his family lies on his shoulders as the eldest son. So this little 12-year-old kid, he gathered enough money to buy one-way ticket to Dakar, which was 7 hours from the village, and Dakar is the capital city. So there, without any money, just with money for the ticket, with just one little bag on his shoulders, he left his village all by himself and went to Dakar, where he didn't know a single human being. And through all types of providential situations, he found a person who was looking for a gardener. He was like, oh yay, wonderful, a job. So he went to talk to the guy, and the guy said, well, you're really tiny, because Badji is such a tiny little man. He's strong, he's really strong, but he's short and he's super, super skinny. So he looked at this 12-year-old kid who was extremely skinny. He said, no, that's impossible, because in Senegal you have to water huge territories of these gardens under the extremely hot sun, and you have to carry these big, blocks of water constantly the whole day, and you have to water those gardens several times a day. Anyway, it's a very, very physically demanding job, and technology is not really there to help. So the boss said no. But Badji begged and he begged and he begged until he was finally allowed like a probation month and a little corner at some kind of a garage where he would stay, and he was given enough food to survive. But at the end of the month, he didn't receive any money because then the boss said, well, it was probation period, so you don't get to have the money. But he proved that he can actually care for the gardens, and he's strong enough, and even though it was difficult, he did manage. And so it's interesting how every single day from the age of 12 up until now that he's around 67, he doesn't know really his age because few people in Senegal do. It's kind of around 67. Every single day of his life, he's been spending his days waking early in the morning, watering the gardens, taking care of the gardens, and going to bed super late and living alone. He does not have a family in Dakar. He didn't find a wife or even friendships. He's struggling with friendships because he's just working literally the whole day.
Wow.
And then he said that most of the money that he gets, he sends to his family, to his village, and sometimes he wants to send extra, so he even skips some of his meals, which is an incredible thing to hear and so painful. And yet, Baji is one of those people who, without romanticizing this, but truly, I have never ever heard him complain, ever.
Wow.
Each time he shares his suffering, and every single time at the end he always adds, but Yalla Bahna, which in Wolof means in their language, it means, but God is good. And truly with joy and life and gratitude that he has family, that he has a job, that he has a roof under his head, which is truly such a powerful witness. And why for me it really struck me, I mean, all of this struck me obviously, but what I read from that situation was, like in the Bible it says, there's no greater love than to lay one's life for your friends. And I think his life was the perfect manifestation of that gospel passage, which is so demanding, and yet this simple man that basically nobody knows about besides some of the people in Dakar that he communicates with and his family. This man for me was the example of holiness and of what it truly means to love. So I think I've had some of those experiences in Senegal where I truly see how this simple are truly the ones that are the true masters. So that friendship was a gift.
Wow, that's so crazy and so beautiful that there are people out there who can do those kinds of things. Do you think that you touched on how like the interconnectedness of society and this gratitude and the selflessness that these people in Senegal had that really touched you? Do you feel like you were able to bring what you learned from Senegal to back home with you and back to college and really implement those things, or are those things that you're kind of still working on and stuff that's like more of a work in progress, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I definitely haven't reached perfection.
I don't think anybody has.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. But it's true that experience in Senegal, especially through these encounters with those particular friends that I was given, changed me and changed the way I look at the world, changed the way I look at other people, at the meaning of life, at what do I want to do with my life. Like it really is a ubiquitous part of my life now. How I'm implementing it, well, I guess I'm just trying to love better. I'm just trying to receive the friends that I am given in my life, that reality has objectively given me, like my housemates, my, I don't know, club mates, my classmates. So recognizing those people that I am given and truly loving them, truly willing their good, and taking the time to nourish that friendship, because it always takes time. It doesn't usually just happen immediately. So investing in those friendships, which is good for both friends, because really it's the beauty of life, because our good usually coincides with the good of the other. I believe in that. And so in investing in the good of the other, of those people around me, is also how I receive my own good. And concretely, I'm trying to be present to the Catholic community, organizing some dinners, some movie nights, just to be together, just to be friends. Just trying to be present to the people that I've been given.
Definitely. You talked a little bit about love too, and loving your friends, loving the people that were given to you. Do you want to talk more about like what you think love is?
Sure, yeah. No, that's actually a very beautiful question. Since truly the meaning of life for me is to love and to be loved. And I don't necessarily reduce all love to romantic type of relationship. But my opinion of love is very much the Catholic opinion, which is true love is to will the good of the other as other. So that's my short answer.
Definitely. Awesome. All right. Well, I guess I want to jump back to the travel aspect that you mentioned of it. And so I guess from personal experience, I feel like when I've traveled, I almost felt like I've known less after I traveled, just because it opens up your mind to so many different things and so many things that you just wouldn't have considered. And I'm wondering, what is something that when you traveled you realized was wrong, that you thought you knew but you realized was not in fact the truth?
One is a more of a personal answer. Yeah, so I was given to go to Japan, which was such a gift and such a blessing. And it was hard at first to get used to the place and etc. But after I finished my 2 years in Japan, I thought, wow, now I'm truly ready for any type of cultural experience like this. if I survived in Japan and I at the end by the end I felt comfortable, I can do whatever I want to do, and any place in the world will feel familiar or not challenging, not as challenging as it would have been otherwise. And then I went to Senegal. That's when I realized I was wrong. I was so wrong. Everything was different. It's an absolutely different world. It's even hard to put into words because the smells, the climate, the things I saw, the things I felt physically, psychologically, just everything. I felt like I'm like in a dream. It's so different. It's even hard to pinpoint exactly the things that were different, but I guess, yeah, smells and tastes and so all the senses that people have, all those 5 senses, had just absolutely different experiences than what they had ever experienced before. And so it was a kind of an invitation to, because it's different to be a tourist, and it's different to realize that you come to this new place, which is so different, and you realize, now I'll have to live here for the next year. That's a totally different realization. It's not just a 2-week trip where you get to enjoy all the cool things and then you leave, but it's, if you are to live there, you have to learn to love the place. And that's different than to just kind of feel these kind of honeymoon type of, wow, this is so cool and people are so happy and it's so sunny and they have this wonderful culture. But it's about learning to love the place. And I realized it's really hard to go to a new place and truly love it, especially because through my experience in Senegal in the beginning, where I really struggled for the first few months, I just realized how poor I am, just my absolute poverty, of how I'm unable to be as happy as I would like to be happy. I was unable to as friendly to people, or simply I thought of myself as somebody who's pretty easygoing and friendly. I can usually find friends quite easily. And I realized because of cultural differences I could not. I was alone, I was misunderstood, I didn't speak the language, so I was simply unknown. And I think that's the most horrible experience anyone could ever go through. Not that I went through the most horrible experience, but I truly think the loneliness, I think, is the greatest suffering, and obviously poverty, like financial poverty, that's horrible and oppressive and should be fixed as much as we can. But I think it's truly loneliness that is the most kind of the thing that takes away the most dignity from people. And yeah, so through recognizing my own poverty, that I'm actually unable to love the place and I'm unable to love those people, I think it really helped my humility, which was a big gift. I didn't see it at the moment like that, but now looking back, it was definitely a big gift. But yeah, the recognition that it's hard to love a country. And then as I continued living in Senegal, and similar with the States as well, when I came, it was also hard to love this place. It was because of the same reasons, similar reasons. And I realized that truly the place to loving the country, or simply the place I'm at, if it's a new place, it's really through learning to love the people that you start to love the place. As you discover the beauty of their culture through the particular people that you know, you discover their own selves, the particular selves that you encounter. And the more you learn to truly love and care for those people, and the more they become important to you, that's kind of the door to learning to love that place and that country. It was similarly to New York, because for each holidays, each breaks, I usually go to New York, because that's where the same community is that I went to Senegal with, and we have houses all around the world. But the only one in the States is only New York. So that's the place I constantly go to. And I really dislike big cities. I really, really dislike big cities. Thus, I'm in Colorado Springs, looking at Pikes Peak every day. But it was hard to love it at first. I came there and I thought, wow, this kind of sucks. And all those rats in the subway, it was bad. And all those smells all around, and that noise and pollution and trash all around. I was not a fan. But yet, I was really welcomed into New York, and welcomed to kind of obtain the gaze of my community, who have lived there for many, many years, and they know so many people, and they have such beautiful friendships and friends they care for and love, and who they love. So through them, I was given a different gaze that kind of led me to actually love New York. And now I'm truly looking forward to going to New York every single time, leaving once again on Tuesday, and I'm super excited. And that's not the case for all big cities. I still am not a fan. I still would not just randomly want to go to, I don't know, Chicago just because it's a wonderful city. But it's really, for me, kind of a realization that it's through loving the people that I'll learn to love the place.
It's very clear that community is essential for all of humans, and I think you especially value community, and that's really powerful. What are ways that you think you can foster that growth of community for maybe people who feel like they can't find that community?
That's such an important question, and such a beautiful question. And it's also a question of mine, so. But so far the reflections I have is, firstly, yes, community is crucial. It's absolutely crucial. I think one of the fundamental desires of a human being is the need to belong. We need to belong. And we can't belong to something super abstract like, well, to a country, but what does it actually mean? I'm an American, okay, I'm a Latvian, that's fine. Or even I'm a Christian, okay, well, what does it mean? The church is ginormous. It's, there's millions of people that are part of the Christianity. So what does it mean to belong? And I think it's about the community of, once again, particular, that's the word I use constantly. It's about belonging to a particular group of people that are given to you, that you simply find on your way in life. So belonging is I think crucial. And then how to find it, or how to foster it? What was the second part of your question exactly?
Yeah, what you said.
Okay. It's a beautiful question. I don't think there's a universal formula for finding a community or finding the sense of belonging. I think it's very much case-to-case basis. It's about, I think, a constant discernment of one's own desires. If one is religious, then probably they should look for a religious community. If one is super concerned about social justice, then probably those are like-minded people that they should look for. But I think generally, community should be based on common values that are truly core values of those people who want to belong to that community. Because if it's superficial, in Aristotle says there's 3 types of friendships. The one is simply convenience. Well, it's convenient to be friends because, I don't know, I get some benefit, or we're in the same class and you're smart, so we better be friends and you'll help me. The other one is in pleasure or enjoyment, which is simply I kind of enjoy spending time with you. You're cool, you're funny, so I get to be happy around you. And then the third friendship, which can also encapsulate the previous 2, but if the previous 2 are the only reason for friendship, that's when it's distorted. But the third type of friendship is that which is based on virtue, on common values together, so that both friends can, once again, will the good of the other, that the other becomes virtuous together with them, and kind of walking, like I have this image in my head where they walk shoulder to shoulder, facing a different direction, not facing each other, but facing something beyond themselves. So either it's a goal of helping people experiencing homelessness, or fighting for other social justice causes, or looking at Christ as the ultimate value, or I don't know, whatever values people have. But as long as there's some kind of core value that unites those people, that all of them can kind of help each other on the way to reaching it. I think that's crucial, and it has to be something truly something that's of core, really, because if it's less superficial, then it's very easy for friendships to dissolve and for communities to dissolve. But as long as there's something that is beyond them, I think that should be the source of all true communities.
What do you think some of your core values are when you search for friendships and community?
My core values. Well, I'm very blessed and lucky that I have found my community, which is the one that I went to Senegal with, and still constantly visit, and they're very much present in my life, and I'm present in their lives. So I found it. But to find that community, my ultimate value was Christ and my faith. I knew that I needed a friendship that is based on faith, just because it's such a huge part of my life, and I believe that's the ultimate meaning of my life. So therefore, that's kind of the very core of who I am, and that's what I also wanted to see be shared in those people that I share my life with to such an intimate extent. When it comes to my friendships here, I don't even know if I look for something particular. I think it's mainly being attentive to, once again, reality, because I believe, for me personally, why I constantly speak about realities, because for me, God speaks through reality. He doesn't speak through imagination as much, or feelings, because they can be misleading, but it's very much the actual reality. So if I find a person who, I don't know, for example, preference is given and we click and we vibe, that's when I'm like, okay, well, that's a gift, and I should probably nourish this instant connection that we had, and actually nourish it so that it can lead to a friendship and not just simple attraction that I like this person, they seem cool. Also, when I see somebody struggling and I see them one time and second time and the third time, that's when I realize, well, that's realities is communicating something to me, so maybe I should invest my time in that friendship. Not this kind of like Mother Teresa, it's like, oh, I pity you, but really knowing that, once again, my good coincides with the good of the other, and if somehow through the science of reality I see that this person's constantly welcomed in my life, there's probably a reason for their continuous presence in my daily life. So or for example, if I'm a part of a club, I'm an RA, the people that are in my team, in Lola team, the Luminous and Language Houses, I know that they are the people that are given to me for this semester, and so I know that I should and I want to nourish those friendships and that community as well. So I think mainly here it's once I have my base community, which is truly my home, I can kind of expand that to simply being attentive to what reality has given me and communicating to me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, do you want to switch gears a little bit and talk about more about your relationship with religion and how kind of you fell into place with all of that and how it's maybe changed over the years?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
Should I just go for it, or do you
Sure,
want to...
just dive in, yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, in short, as I told you, I grew up in a Catholic family. We went to Mass. I remember I hated going to Mass every Sunday. And my mom would say, you can only not go to Mass if you're sick. If you're so sick that you can't exit the house otherwise. And I was like, man, okay, well. So sometimes I would fake being sick and I would stay in my room, in my bed, literally the whole day, just to escape that 1 hour in the church, which is kind of radical, I think, a little extreme. But I hated it. But obviously, the time went by and I kind of grew up a little bit, and that's when I could actually tell my mom, no, I'm not going to go to church, and I'm also not going to stay in my bed, and I will do whatever I want to do. And that happened when I was, as I said, maybe 12, 13, I don't remember anymore. And I started hanging out with my friends a lot. I kind of neglected school, and I was really involved in parties, and in Eastern Europe it's North, and in North Europe it's sometimes Northern Europe. It happens quicker in the States, I've noticed. So children, literally children who are still 12, 13, 14, they sometimes that's the time they develop all types of addictions. And so I kind of went down that route a little bit. And then I remember one of the very vivid experiences was, and there have been many, but one of them was I went to the World Youth Days in Krakow, which is kind of this huge, ginormous young people gathering, all of whom mostly are Catholics. There's millions of people, and the Pope comes, and it's like this huge festival. And I remember I just went because my friends went, because I belonged to this community through my mom. Anyway, it was a long story. Mm-hmm. And so I went there, and I was absolutely amazed by how young and vibrant and beautiful the church actually was, because in my home parish, it was a few, maybe a couple super elderly ladies coming to mass every day, and that's it. It was dead. There was no life. There was no joy, definitely. It was kind of a sense of death, really. So seeing this totally other side of the church, which is so young and so beautiful and so joyful. And I remember looking around and seeing so many priests and religious and young people and teenagers and sometimes even children, sometimes even elderly people, even though it was kind of meant for young people. But, they're young in their hearts. It's all a social construct anyway. But seeing so much joy, and that was the time in my life when I definitely did not have joy. I was a very sad teenager. It was kind of a dark time. And so seeing that almost the joy that almost seems like it's not of this world, where it was truly encountering a totally different world. And I thought to myself, I want that. I also want to be joyful. I want exactly that. What they have, whatever it is, I want that. And that's what kind of urged me to reflect more and look around and see that there's so many intelligent people, and many people gave talks in that festival, and I thought, wow, many of them have like PhDs in philosophy and theology, and they're super intelligent, and yet they believe in God. So maybe it's not stupid to believe. Maybe there's actually some rational, good reasons for why people would believe in something like that. So then I, once again, started reading. I started being more involved in the church. And I think, my faith grew. I found a beautiful community back in Latvia, which, once again, through community, it really strengthened my faith. And then I went to Senegal, which was very much faith-based. And I think that's truly the kind of a point of true conversion, when I realized just how much faith means to me. And that was not through some kind of intellectual reasoning that was already in the past, and it still continues, but that particular experience was based on simply encounters with human being, through whom I was invited to notice Christ himself. But when I realized that I can actually encounter God in other people, and I've had those experiences where they moved me so much that nothing has ever moved my heart so much, I realized there must be something true. So it's not only all the rational reasons and arguments, these cosmological Thomas Aquinas arguments for the existence of God. It's not simply something I can approach through my reason, but it's also something that a clear awareness that something corresponds so deeply to who I am as a person, to my desires for truth, for justice, for beauty, for all those things, for belonging, and recognizing that this is what corresponds. And that, so ever since, I'm a happy little Catholic.
Wow, that's really powerful. Definitely. Do you want to talk more about how philosophy almost guided you towards Catholicism even more, and kind of how those two subjects merged for you?
Yeah. Do you know Edith Stein? Probably not. She's not very well known.
I think I've heard of her, but I'm not.
Okay, even if you heard of her, it's already big. I'm very happy. So she was a Jewish Jewish girl who was born in Germany, the first half of the 20th century. And then she later converted. So then she became an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And she was this super duper philosopher. That was the first time that female philosophers were allowed to study in universities. They were still not allowed to teach, but they could get PhDs, which was kind of wonderful. Already one step toward more of an equality. And so she studied philosophy. She got a PhD. She wrote this dissertation on empathy, which is actually what I'm working on my thesis as well right now, this block. And all throughout her career of philosophy, she simply wanted to know the truth. Like, she was aiming for the truth, and she knew God does not exist, so that could not be the truth. So what is the truth? What is the true meaning of my life? Why do I exist? Why does this world exist? How come it exists? And so these were the questions that she constantly kept asking herself. And then she read one day Saint Teresa of Avila's book, and something in that book moved her so much that she read this whole book, and it's kind of long. Mm-hmm. She read the whole book in one night, and she put down the book, and she said, "I have found the truth, and that's Christ." And then she converted to Catholicism super quickly. Because she was so smart, she knew all the theological truths already according to Catholicism, so she didn't even have to go through the RCIA process, whatever that people who want to convert have to go through. She was kind of waived all that process because she was kind of a genius. And then later she entered the Carmelite monastery. She became a nun, and then she was killed in Auschwitz. So her story is quite tragic, but at the same time beautiful, which is what the beauty I found, kind of superficially kind of summarizing the beauty that I found in her life story, was that she was looking for truth, and in the process of looking for truth, she was actually considering suicide, because she was so aware of this desire, of this intrinsic need that she had to find the truth, to know the truth, that she thought like she couldn't continue living without having this truth. And then through philosophy, and then through reading that book, which is also theologically philosophical, she said, "That's the moment. That's the truth." She recognized the truth. So for me, although it's not as I think radically beautiful and radically telling, it is true that I started reading books, all those atheists like Hawkins and many YouTubers as well. I thought I was trying to be as unbiased as I can, and trying to discern firstly whether God exists, and then not even Christian God or Catholic God specifically, since there's so many denominations, but simply, does God exist? Because either he does or he doesn't. Both cannot be true, so I need to find the one truth. And I thought, obviously, I was trying my best to not be biased, but looking back, I had the desire to believe. I recognized that I wanted to believe. But honestly, most of the atheist books, new atheism is really, it's kind of a caricature of true philosophical atheism. It's really very badly argued, and it's really hard to find good atheist books. There really are some. Mackey is one of the authors that is really good, very philosophically intelligent way of proving that God does not exist, although there's some flaws in his arguments. I actually wrote an essay about him in my metaphysics class. But yeah, so I was reading those books, and I was reading arguments for God, especially Thomas Aquinas and his 5 proofs for the existence of God. And I realized it just makes much more sense to believe that he exists through those arguments. And then, I continued with, St. Augustine. I continued with contemporary philosophers and theologians like Balthasar and Giussani. And those truly opened a perspective to me that in fact faith and reason are not at odds with each other. I realized through philosophy, because I was always afraid of believing something that is not rational, that is not logical, and I realized they're really not at odds, because, for example, I've never been to Australia, and I believe Australia exists. I believe because people tell me, I see that in the news, but once again, it's faith. And similarly, faith in science for somebody who's not themselves a scientist It's, well, those scientists say that la 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 is true, therefore it's true because I believe in science, and once again, I believe in science. It's truly a kind of a belief if you're not the one to truly go through all the experiments yourself in the laboratory and getting the final results. So I realized there's an element of faith in simply being human. Like, you have to live your life as a human being through faith. You rely on the knowledge that other people tell you and share with you. And that's how I started to view faith, was relying on the testimonies and knowledge of those people that came before me, that are still in front of me, and believing that what they say is true. And that's also based on relationship, because, for example, if a stranger tells me, you should go to that place, it's really cool, it's kind of obscure, but it's really cool, you will enjoy it, I might not believe. Then if my mom says, who loves me, who cares for me, who I know who cares for me, if she says go to that place, it's really cool, I will be much more inclined to trust my mom. So once again, it comes from this place of knowing that I am loved and I'm cared for, and that's how I can rely on the knowledge that I'm given. And then even more so philosophically, I think, as Bishop Barron says, he's this big bishop. He has a master's in philosophy, PhD in theology. He's like this huge spokesperson in the internet world on Catholicism and the Catholic faith, and he's like super intellectual. So I really appreciate his work and his books and his videos. And he says that faith, the simple definition of faith, is the response to the revealing God, revealing himself. So it's my response to the revealing God. And how he says is that faith comes from, first there's reason, and reason can get you to some truths. But there's limits to reason. And when the limits come, that's when faith takes over. So, for example, there's a person you love, and suddenly they share something with you that you would not have known otherwise. Even though you know where they lived before, you know their life story, you know their family, there's something that's so personal and so intimate to who they are that you would not know it otherwise if they didn't tell you wouldn't know. And that's when faith comes in. That's a decision whether I will believe in what they say, even though I have no kind of rational reasons to believe, because it's only that person who knows this information about themselves, which they decided to share with me. So reason is not going to help me to believe them or not, but it's an act of faith, whether I believe what they say or not, and whether I welcome this person even in a more, and their depth even more, to a deeper extent, or I don't believe and I stay with my rationality based on what I can deduce rationally, and that's where I stop. So that's how I view faith, and I think that's how philosophy really helped me to kind of grow in my faith, so that I'm not afraid of my faith, because I know it can be argued for, and it has a lot of good arguments, and it can be very logical. So I'm no longer afraid of it, but it's a way for me to really kind of intertwine more naturally and more dynamically the both faith and reason.
That's very interesting. I didn't realize that they go so hand in hand. I think that's very unique.
Yeah, and I think because in the Bible it says you have to love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your body. So literally all aspects of your being should be are there to love God, which means also intelligence. It's not simply given because why not? It's given also to get to know God and to not be afraid of using the intelligence to find God, because if God is the truth, then you will find it. If God is not the truth, then you will realize he's not the truth. And of course, not all people are theists, so obviously that could be very much argued against. But in my life, I've seen that has been true. The more I've used my reason to look for God, the more I've used my reason to look for the truth in general, the more I was drawn to God. So in a way, it's never a competition between your heart and your mind, but it becomes very much combined in a greater force of love for God and for God and in neighbor as well.
You talked a lot about this kind of search for what is the truth, and I guess I'm wondering, why do you feel very compelled to search for the truth?
That's a good question. It's a It's a very simple and a very good question that is actually not simple at
No,
all.
definitely not.
I don't know. I think an analogy would be, imagine if you're just walking in the forest, just, taking a little walk, seeing those beautiful leaves and beautiful sun and some animals. Hopefully not bears or wolves, but, it happens. It actually happened a few days ago, I think.
Wow.
It might have been a wolf or a coyote, I'm not sure, but it was a
Oh my
kind of a
gosh.
scary situation. Anyways, so you're walking the forest, and you notice an intact grand piano. It's just there. It's just intact. It's beautiful, and it's a grand piano. It's expensive. I think the most natural human response is to ask, how come it's here? Why is there a piano? What's the story behind it? And I think what this situation points to is that there's an inherent instinct to look for the truth. In that case, it would be the truth of that situation. Why is it here? Like, who put it here? How come? Why? Maybe people will later come and take it, but it's not simply, well, it's there because it is, or somebody says, I don't know, birds brought it here, because it's obviously not true, so it wouldn't be satisfactory. It wouldn't be a satisfactory answer. So you're looking for something that is the true answer to a question. And similarly, when you, I don't know, even in relationship, you want to hear the truth of what the other person is feeling, what they're saying, how they're actually feeling about you, how they are feeling about the world. So lies are not satisfactory. People, I think it's an inherent desire for people to know the truth. And in a more kind of metaphysical and global scale, it's about, what is the truth of my existence? Why do I exist? Why does this world exist in the first place? Why it could not have existed? It's such a small, tiny possibility of it existing, so why does it exist? So I think it's simply part of being human to want to ask questions, and then to want to know the truth to those questions, the answer that is true.
Do you think that happiness is a choice, or it's something that you find that is almost a predetermined truth?
Good question. Do you make happiness happen, or does it happen to you? So yesterday I went to a presentation that one of the philosophy majors was graduating in a week, I guess, very soon. He gave this presentation on his thesis, and his topic was addiction. And so it was a talk about what truly is addiction. Is it simply this biological phenomenon that is happening with you, and you simply have no agency whatsoever? Or is it a moral lack? It's like you lack the good virtues, and it's your fault, and you fell into this. And what I got from it, and there's obviously so much more to the presentation, but addiction is both. It's inside and it's outside. Of course, people have such horrible life circumstances that is almost impossible to fight, and that can often lead to substance abuse and all types of other addictions. And yet why he chose this topic was because he has been addicted to many things in the past, and it's still an ongoing process, and he was very open about it, and it was truly a beautiful kind of testimony, and yet it was still intellectual and philosophically beautiful, and very courageous, definitely, because he shared it. And for him it was both. It was definitely the external circumstances, but the crucial aspect of falling into an addiction is also breaking one's own integrity. So that's why the way out of it for him was to find something beyond himself, which could be God or could be other values, as we talked about. It's something external, but also it's becoming once again faithful to one's own sense of integrity. So it's both. I don't think it's possible to really separate myself from the external world, or the external world from myself. So I think it's similar with happiness. I think definitely happiness and luck and circumstances of life play a huge role. I would call luck providence, but in secular language it's luck. Definitely it plays a huge role, but it's also the response to how one is to react to those external circumstances. And then again, John, the professor here at Colorado College, he talks a lot about self-psychology, and it's basically this formation of the self, the very foundational structure of one's psyche. That's the most crucial period, is obviously from the moment you're born up until maybe you're 7, 8, maybe 12. Those are the absolute formative years of your self, the structure of the self. And if it's fragile, if it's been neglected by parents and some kind of abuse situations in childhood, it's going to be very, very difficult to be a healthy, functioning human individual later on. So obviously there's also that, and the childhood traumas, etc., or just any traumas. But if we talk about healthy human beings who have experienced a decent childhood and parents were there to support him, give them food, emotional support, then I think a big part of it is choice. And I see that, once again, as I talked about previously, I see that in Senegal, for example. Once again, there's a danger of romanticizing those people, of course, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But it's true that I discovered incredible strength and hope in the midst of the suffering that is unimaginable to me. I've never experienced that type of oppression and suffering. They do, and yet they were the ones who taught me to be joyful, that taught me to be hopeful, that taught me to grow in faith. Whereas life circumstances, the circumstances of them, the ones that they had, were obviously, objectively looking, were so much worse than mine. And yet, I could learn so much from their hope and faith and happiness.
I feel like you would have a very interesting answer to this question. Do you think you are a good person? And if so, how would you define being a good person?
Oh, that's a good question. Am I a good person? So, once again, it's my faith who will color this answer. What my faith teaches me constantly is never to compare myself to other people. The only person I am to compare myself to is God. And he's perfect. He's all good. He has never made a single mistake. He's incredible. And then there's me. And in comparison to him, I'm not great. I'm not good. And if I am good, that's a gift from him who's all good and the source of all good. So, yeah, from that perspective, if I'm good, it's only because God gave me the gift of goodness, the gift of virtue that I still often fail at, very, very often. But fundamentally, I'm good because God made me good. So it's not something I achieve myself, but it's really God's grace that I simply engage my freedom to accept. So it's not something that I generated myself, but it's something I chose to receive. And yes, I think I'm good. And yet at the same time, I'm very well aware of all the poverty. And I think each day, and the more I grow in my faith, the more I recognize the depths of my soul that have been kind of hidden away, and there has been no light for me to notice that, there's actually something more and something deeper, and a root of a weakness and vice that's still there that I wasn't even aware of. So that's kind of the beauty of also growing in faith, is to to grow in goodness and to grow in love of God, and yet at the same time simultaneously to be more and more and more acutely aware of the evil that's actually in me. So it's kind of a beautiful way to not grow too prideful when you notice that you are becoming better, because it's also the truth. If you are striving to be better, you will be better. If you're striving to accept the grace of God, you will become better. And the antidote for the pride that can sneak in is the inherent awareness that is given at the same time of, but actually there's something else that I didn't know before.
What would you say are some things you maybe want to change, things you want to keep going, some goals, just like talk about future for Kristine?
Future for Kristine. That's a really good question. It's a very timely question because I'm graduating in May. So the simplest thing I can share is I'm trying to apply to grad schools. PhD philosophy. I'm planning to be a philosophy professor. Inshallah. We'll see. It's really hard to get into them, so I'm kind of prepared not to get into any programs. But career-wise, that would be the absolute goal, to continue studying philosophy, and then use that philosophy and help those students who are looking for a way out of the nihilism of postmodern world, and try to see some kind of meaning that Greek philosophy and medieval philosophy and some of the contemporary philosophers can offer. Otherwise, I don't know, man. I'm just going with the flow. I'm excited to see where I'm gonna find myself. If it's the States, somewhere in the States, that's wonderful. If life's gonna bring me to Europe, I'm gonna be happy to go back. So I don't know. I'm just really excited. I think it's simply excitement. I don't really have any plans or big projects for my life, but I'm just excited to see what reality will give me, because so far it's been incredible.
I'm excited for you.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, it's even better not to plan, because each time looking to my past, I've noticed that all the things that I've experienced have been so much beyond what I could even imagine for myself. So I have the kind of a plan for my next step, which is grad school, and then everything else will happen.
Do you ever feel like some voices in your head are maybe calling you to go back to Senegal?
Oh. I love Senegal. I truly love Senegal. And just recently we had our house celebrated 30-year anniversary of our presence in Senegal, and I couldn't go, and I was so upset. And some of my community, one of my community sisters, she went. She's Italian, Giovanna Buongiorno. Imagine her last name is Buongiorno. It's just like good day. Really cool. So it's so funny. It's such a joke between us and everybody else who knows her. So anyway, she could come and she sent me pictures, and it was such a painfully beautiful thing to see all those friends and the children that are now bigger and older, and that some of them I can't even recognize anymore. It's so crazy. So definitely I want to visit. For sure, I want to visit. I am not sure if that's the place I'm called to live, but it's definitely a place where it still feels like it's home, and I still feels like I have family there. So it's definitely something I want to come back to as often as I possibly can. Probably not living, but visiting as much as possible. Yes.
Is there any last things you want to touch on? Any last messages? Things you want to explore? Thoughts?
I don't know.
If you want the world to know one thing, what would it be?
Good question. As all of these questions are good. If there is one thing I want everybody to know, is that we are made to love and to be loved. And the only way to be happy is to offer love and to receive love. That's the only way to be happy. Nothing else will do that. Nothing else. Money, fame, success. Those can be helpful, but they will never truly give one the meaning, because it's never the end. It's never they're not the ends of and in themselves. It's always for something else. So money is for something else. So what, you can't just receive money and be happy. You will spend it for something. Or fame as well. It's not simply fame. It's wanting to be seen and looked at. It's truly what the fundamental underlying desire is. Same with success, is to be respected, to be well regarded, to be once again looked and seen and loved. Looked at and seen and loved. So fundamentally, the main reason for our lives, I think, is to offer love and to receive it.
I think a lot of people would agree that love is essential in life, but maybe like the fear of failure, the fear of rejection gets in the way of that for them. How do you overcome that and decide to be better and decide to love?
It's an important question. It's true that fear of rejection is big, and a lot of people have experienced a lot of suffering because of that. But it's a human condition to be faced with suffering, and that's why we never have to kind of seek it out, because it will happen to us. Every single person suffers. We all have suffering, every single one of us. It might be different, it might be more, it might be less acute, but we all experience suffering. That's simply a part of human condition that should be accepted, because there's no way of escaping it. There's absolutely no way. So might as well just accept it. Just like you accept the fact that you have to eat to survive, you will eat. And similarly with suffering, you have to be, I have to accept the fact that I will suffer, but it's different to suffer alone and different to suffer with somebody else who cares. So I think and it's hard, it's extremely demanding, but I think the way to love and go beyond the fear of rejection, go beyond the fear of suffering, is to live. There's a beautiful word in French, gratuité. It's like gratuitousness, because in the States it's actually interesting how it's intertwined with the concept of money a little bit, because the tips that you give at the end, but it means in total something totally for free. It's an absolute gratuitousness that we must live out love. So love should be fully centered on the other, really. It should be fully centered on the other, not on myself. Because if I love so that I can get something for myself, it's no longer love. It's no longer love. So the only true love could be, once again, willing the good of the other as other, not of myself, but willing the good of the other, and giving love gratuitously. And I think when people encounter this type of love, when people experience that they are loved in such a way that is so fully centered on them and not on the person doing the loving, that changes hearts. And that's, I think, when people receive such love, which is true and pure and beautiful, that's how they learn to give it back, and that's how they become aware of their own necessity to also give it to others. So I think loving gratuitously will automatically make you be loved. And yes, there will still be heartbreak, there will still be suffering, but at least friendship-wise, I think that's how it works. Is to love, to let the other experience the true beauty of love, which will change their hearts, because it's impossible for true love not to change one's heart, not to convert it, and then they will want to give it back. It's kind of a reciprocal relationship, if it's a true love, if it's not distorted and self-centered and egocentric.
What a beautiful note to end on. I love it. I love it.
Thank you, Clara. It's really such a pleasure to be here, and I think it's such a beautiful project that you're doing and putting so much effort into. And I'm very grateful that we have such a thing here on campus.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoy having people on and talking to different people about all sorts of things. So really happy that you can make it on. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Hi everybody, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode with Kristine. I enjoyed it so much and I hope you did too. I just want to take a moment to talk about how I changed the podcast name. As you may have noticed, it used to be called Point of View, but I changed it to Extraordinary because I think that fits what is going on in this podcast a little bit better. So just a little note on that. But all of the content will be the same. I'm changing up the interview styles a little bit, but it's going to be the same deep conversations and same meaningful talks that have been had in the past. So none of the content is really changing. Anyways, if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to rate this podcast on the Apple Podcast app and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And share with your friends and family if you think they might enjoy it. So have a great holiday, and thank you so much for tuning in today.